Okay, so today we're picking up with other foreign and defense policy agencies, and there's a couple of them that help out the State Department and the Defense Department as they're figuring out our foreign and defense policies. So they help out the president as well. So first up, we're going to look at the CIA, which is the Central Intelligence Agency, and it was established in 1947 by Congress. So this is an agency that was arranged for by Congress to help out. And they work under the National Security Council is kind of like who's in charge. But basically the CIA has three basic tasks that they do, or three jobs that they do. And the first is that they collect information to analyze and evaluate. And so they're collecting information about other countries that we analyze and evaluate. And the second job or task that they do is that they brief the president on this information, basically looking at who could be a threat to the U.S., who we have good relationships with, what are potential things that we need to be watching out for. The third task is that they conduct worldwide intelligence operations. So they're watching for newspapers, they're looking at radio, TV, satellites, and what they're observing. So there's a lot of different things that they are doing, but they're gathering information. That's the most important thing that they are doing. The CIA tends to be a very secretive agency. It's often nicknamed the Cloak and Dagger Agency because not even Congress knows everything that it does. A lot of things, in order to protect the agents and their mission, it has to be kept secret. And so, since, politicians aren't really good at hiding things sometimes, a lot of times they aren't informed of what's going on until after the fact. The National Security Act of 1947 deals with the CIA as well. It protects U.S. citizens from investigation and surveillance by the CIA because the CIA initially is established to watch other countries, not our own. And so doesn't mean it doesn't happen, because it does. It occasionally does happen that they are investigating U.S. citizens or putting U.S. citizens under surveillance, but they're not supposed to, I guess, is kind of, because we're supposed to be protected by the National Security Act of 1947. However, if there's a U.S. citizen that could potentially be a threat to the U.S., then I guess it's justifiable. And the next agency that we're going to look at is the U.S. Information Agency, or the USIA, which is the United States Information Agency. And its job is to promote the image and policies of the U.S. abroad in foreign countries. So it is promoting us to other countries. How do they do that? Well, they put in their own radio ads and TV ads and broadcasts. They make their own publications. Exchange programs is another way that the USIA is very prevalent in having an exchange program for students, businesses, having businesses interact and exchange, athletes, medics, all kinds of stuff, in order to build those relationships and let foreign countries see that we're not bad, or that our policies are good and that they work, and that kind of thing. The next one is the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, which is NASA. And NASA was established in 1957 when the Soviets first put their first satellite into space. We developed NASA in response to that because it kind of freaked us out. So NASA is a peaceful organization. It was not ever intended to be used for as a weapon. And so its jobs include things like researching the universe, exploring outer space, developing a space station, but within its charter, or within its organization, it says that it must operate on peaceful terms, and it must operate to benefit all humankind. So not just the United States, it's supposed to benefit all the planet. Anyway, so NASA has opened new frontiers in astronomy and physics, all kinds of stuff like environmental science, communications, medicine, even weather, and predicting the weather has been improved because of NASA. And NASA operates all over the country. There are numerous different places where it's located, but the major ones that get talked about in the news, Kennedy Space Center in Florida, Johnson Space Center, which is in Texas, the Ames Research Center, which is in California. There's also a jet propulsion lab in California, and then the Goddard Space Flight Center, which is in Maryland. So it's located all over the country, and they have different jobs that they do. So the next agency is the U.S. Arms Control and U.S. Arms Control and Disarmament Agency, the ACDA. And its job is to negotiate with countries that have nuclear weapons or nuclear capabilities, and to try and reduce those nuclear weapons and nuclear capabilities. So they've been working on a series of treaties, and these treaties are called the START treaties, and they're the Strategic Arms Reduction Treaties. And START 1 and 2, START 1 has passed, START 2 is still in progress, but START 1 was in 1991 and START 2 was in 1993. These treaties were between the U.S. and Russia, where we agreed to reduce our nuclear arsenals. START 1 was a success. We met the goals of START 1, and so then they started START 2. And START 2 is held up by Russia. The U.S. Senate has ratified it. We've agreed to do what START 2, this treaty says, but Russia has not ratified it yet. Basically because of NATO actions in Eastern Europe, basically. But START 3 can't begin until START 2 is done, and so START 3 is supposed to reduce our nuclear weapons down to 3,000 per country, 3,000 for us and 3,000 for Russia. So that's the goal, is to eventually get down to 3,000 nuclear warheads, which is kind of a scary number, but that's the goal. In 1996, 126 nations signed the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty, which is going to end nuclear testing in the Earth's atmosphere. It's not yet in place, unfortunately, because you have to have at least 44 countries ratify it, and we haven't had 44 countries. 126 nations have signed it, saying that they're willing to do it, but their country, when they take the treaty back to their country hasn't ratified it and been on board with it. So it's kind of like when the U.S., when we sign a treaty, it's our president that signs it, but our Senate has to approve it. So it's kind of that same kind of deal in most other countries as well. So they still can test in the Earth's atmosphere, even though it's highly frowned upon. The U.S. or the ACDA also keeps track of the nuclear powers in the world, and there's basically two divisions. You have the major nuclear powers, which are those that are known powers, that we know they have nuclear weapons, and then you have the minor nuclear powers, and these are the ones that we know they have the money, they have the capability, but it's not openly acknowledged that they actually have the weapons. So the major nuclear powers in the world today are the U.S., Russia, Great Britain, France, and China, as well as North Korea, Pakistan, and India. So lots of major powers out there that we know have nuclear weapons. The minor nuclear powers, like I said, are those that have the money and the capabilities, but we don't really know if they have the weapons. They've never openly tested, and they've never openly said, yeah, we've got some. And that would include Israel, and it would also include Iran, which we know that Iran has the capabilities, but they keep telling us that, you know, they're just using it for energy source, but they have the capabilities. And then terrorist groups. We know they have the money, we know they have the capabilities of probably putting one together or purchasing them from someone, but they've never actually said, yeah, we've got some. So again, we just don't know. So we have multiple major powers, and we only have 3 minor powers. The next group, or next thing that helps with our foreign and defense policy, is the Selective Service System, which is the draft. It applies to all able-bodied males who are over the age of 18, that you are required to sign up to be eligible for the draft. Now, just because you sign up doesn't mean you have to serve, doesn't mean you go automatically into the military. It just means that should we need to have a draft, then you young men, as you turn 18, could be eligible to be drafted. Doesn't mean that all of you will get drafted, it just means that you have the potential, you have the ability. This was first used in 1917 by the U.S. in World War I, and again in Vietnam, and occasionally it's been brought up on whether or not it should be used in other wars as well, depending on the numbers that we have in our military. So those are the agencies that help us out and help out the President and the Secretary of State and Secretary of Defense. Our next video will look at American foreign policy, looking at how we've gotten to where we are today.